This is Damian Macy, representing the Friends of the Marshall Library on our oral history project. And today is November the 1st of 2017, and I'm at the library with Mary Jenkins. She lives here in Marshall now and has kind of an interesting background, and I think we'll probably learn quite a bit about Mary and her career. So with that, Mary, it's on, and you can start talking.
Okay. I was born in Sealyville, Indiana. That is just east of Terre Haute. I was raised there until I was probably 7 years old. My parents divorced when I was 6 and my brother was 7. And we lived with our father and our grandfather out on the farm in Cloverland, Indiana. And my dad did that and a milk route. So we stayed there for a while, and then we lived with our mother. And my mother was a hard worker. She worked in a laundry, which was really hard work in those days. My brother and I, like I said, are only 14 months apart, him the oldest, so my mother still had 2 babies when I was born.
And what is your brother's name?
Robert Brown. Robert Brown lived here in Marshall for a long time. He was married to Kathy Mott. And so after several years, should I say?
Well, I'll just ask this, in your period of time living on the farm, did you have farm chores and things that you had to do?
We fed the pigs and the cows. And everybody worked in the garden. And I remember once they were eating, they had, what are those things that look like a big rat? Possum. I didn't know. That's the most disgusting thing I ever heard.
Did your mother do things like canning and things out of the garden and stocking
My
us up for the winter?
mother did when she lived in the country when she was married to my stepfather, and she did a lot of canning. She made butter and cottage cheese, and my little daughter, my oldest daughter, would get up there and go yum yum. She loved cottage cheese. So, and it was freshly made.
Oh man!
So
it usually doesn't look too pretty as it's being made, as I recall.
Yeah, it doesn't. But Mother and Dad, my stepfather, lived in Fountainette, Indiana, and they lived up on a hill. Dad built the house, which I visited not long ago with my cousin from New Jersey. She came and we ran around that day and went out to see the old home house. But Dad built that house, and it's a nice, sturdy brick house. So anyhow, what can I say?
Well, tell me about school. Did you attend a one-room school or go into town? Or
In fact, we lived in Illinois for a short time, and that was a one-room school. We had 8 students. I was the only one in the 2nd grade. My brother was the only one in the 3rd grade. And I can remember the winters because we would walk.
Okay.
And the teacher would drive, and she would pick us up and take us through his way to school. She was young and pretty. That's all I remember about. I don't even remember names.
Do you remember some of the things that took place in that one-room school? Were you listening as other kids were reciting, maybe in an advanced grade? And, hey, I can pick that up and learn things ahead of time?
I was struggling. I struggled in school, so I was probably paying attention to what I was trying to do. And then as I got older and I was living with my mother, I went to St. Anne's Catholic Church and went to school there because they had up to the 8th grade.
That was in Terre Haute.
In Terre Haute, And so we had our class wasn't too big. I have a picture of my class. And so I started working in a hospital when I was 18 years old. I had married at 16. I was 16 years old when I got married. And at 18, I had a new little daughter, and I started working at the hospital. I worked in the medical floor at that time. And later on, they opened up a new ICU unit, and I worked there a short time before. I was working nights, and I said, I can't do nights. I just cannot do nights. You gotta put me on days, so.
What hospital was that?
That was St. Anthony. And so I started working in ER then. And I remember in 1975, we moved to the new regional hospital. And I worked day shift mostly. I did all the ordering for the unit. My daughter says, you taught a lot of the nurses, which the nurses said too. A lot of the students, they would come from Ivy Tech and ISU. And the ones from Ivy Tech, they were on the ball. ISU wanted to sit back with their books. And I said, you're not going to learn anything sitting back here. You get out there and you help us. So they did.
Mary, what was your background or training to be able to do that?
We had classes, which it's a 100-hour class now, but I don't remember how many hours we had. We went to Ivy Tech, and we had an instructor, and we went, 2 evenings a week, I believe. And we had, the hospital said they would pay for, if we passed our tests, they would pay for it, so, which they did. And we all passed. And like I said, we had several of the firemen that went through the class with us. And I've got pictures somewhere at home, but I don't know where they are. So anyhow, we did had a lot of experience. I've seen families nearly wiped out with car accidents. I've went to the door and had a dead baby put in my arms where it died of SIDS. And I've seen a guy that was shot right in the heart. You could see his heart beating. And I think the hardest thing is to lose a child in ER. Mm-hmm. When we lost a child, we were all crying. So.
I guess what you're saying there, and I guess that's always thought, maybe any nurse, but especially something like emergency room, does it take a certain type of personality or a person to be able to face that day in and day out?
I kind of think so.
I would think
I've
so.
seen people come and go, but we were kind of like a little family group. The ones that I worked with was good. I didn't have anybody leaning over my shoulder because I knew what I was doing and I was going to do it. And and those girls are still friends of mine. We worked together many years. And in fact, I get a card from one every Christmas that says, I love you.
Nice. That period of time that you're talking about now, and the moving to Terre Haute Regional and all, those days, and to gradually move up, what has all this changed and taken place in the medical field in those years? Obviously, there's been so many changes in everything.
Oh my gosh. You know, even the medicines, I didn't have to give shots, but before I quit, we were cathing patients. We were starting IVs. We did not give medicines or drugs. That was one thing we didn't do. We set up for, if doctor was going to suture, a non-sterile field. You knew that. I had one surgeon that would only work with me when he'd come in ER to do something. Everybody else would run because they were scared of him. But he always treated me with respect. As Dr. Kunkler, and he passed away last Christmas time. I seen that in the paper.
I saw in today's paper there's a Dr. Alsa Coffey passed away.
Oh, Dr. Elsa Caffey?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, him or her? Because
him, doctor.
yeah, they were both
But
doctors, but it
him,
was the male.
It was him, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
He was my mother's doctor I know at one time too, and she thought a great deal of him.
Yeah, he worked with us at one time too, and I went and babysat with their youngest child, Dr. Elsa Caffey. She was a little more temperamental than he was, but I worked with both of them. Oh, I didn't know that.
Again, coming those changes, I guess I'm kind of interested in hearing what your feel of that is. Mechanics, things have changed, medicines have improved, procedures I'm sure have improved to help save lives. What are some of those changes that you find as maybe dramatic or wow?
I think with the heart monitors that they have now, that they have out in the field, you know, the ambulances have them, and they put them on the patient, and it does their heart rhythm for them. But I think that's one of the most amazing things, and the drugs that they're able to carry because they're paramedics. So,
Does the fact that that ambulance has a lot of equipment, does that help maybe the patient in getting from the accident scene to the emergency room?
absolutely. Absolutely. It's a matter of life and death sometime. If they could start an IV out there in the field and get medication going, or if they have a patient that's been overdosed, they can give them Narcan or something like that, can save their life. These guys are very smart. They're paramedics. They go through a lot of training. And I had a couple that would come in ER, and I thought, if anything ever happened to me, I hope you're on the ambulance. And your son's one of them.
Thank you.
So.
Now I think most of them have equipment too that they can radio or advance the information
Right.
while
Right
they're
to
en
ER.
route to the emergency room.
Yeah. And either the doctor or the head nurse will take that information. I mean, we didn't do anything like that. But we can go ahead, in my situation, I could go ahead and put the monitor pads on, hook them up, you know, to things like that, and get everything started, do their blood pressure and everything like that. And that frees up the nurse to do the more important things.
Has government regulation and requirements made it more difficult in the emergency room or less difficult?
I think the government interferes too much. When patients are made to go home that are not ready to go home. And I've seen this happen a lot. And we have one doctor that kind of got around it on his own, Dr. Lowenstein, but bless his heart, he's passed on. But if his patient wasn't ready to go home, he made something up that they were going to stay. So.
To take today's factors in the emergency room in the hospital and to go back maybe even just to the turn of the century, 2000, which is almost 20 years. Are we better off and more likely to survive an accident or an illness today than we would have been back then?
Out in the field, yes, if the ambulance is there, you know, because they have all the knowledge they need. These guys are really smart, and they always go to the nearest hospital in case of an emergency like that. They go to the nearest hospital if they have a real critical patient. And
well, back before those emergency hospitals and those ambulances. At one time, the only our way to get to the hospital was if someone took you in the car, or the funeral homes at that time used their ambulances. So there was no one trained or ready to help that person until they got to the hospital.
That's right. They didn't have medications or anything on board that they could help anybody.
I think they had oxygen, and that was about it, wasn't it?
That was about it. But I even worked part-time on the ambulance, and that was kind of hard, because if two of us girls would go out and get a patient, especially if they were heavy, come and help us. But
I guess the gruesomeness and things of maybe in the emergency room, and that is an emergency. It's not something that they can take their time with, or we've got to study. You've got to act quickly. You
got to be there, and you got to act, and you got to do right now. So.
Did the doctor give you that, I guess, that feeling and feeling of we've got to do this, or was that just something you learned by instinct?
It's automatic, after you've worked there for a while. You see what's coming in, you know how to prepare for that patient, get things that you're going to need. You got to think ahead and get it done. And I never had a problem with that, because I knew my job, You knew you need to be prepared. It's like a Boy Scout, I guess.
The younger crowd coming up, do you think they're as well prepared?
I think they are. I think they're getting more training than we had.
Okay.
Longer time. Every year you got to be recertified in CPR. Yeah, right. And for babies, you got to be recertified for babies, because my daughter is labor and delivery nurse. So they had to go through that every year. And every year you're scared to death. I don't know why, because it's something that you do automatically.
Well, now, I know earlier tests and recertification, I'm sure, was on a paper form. Are they on computer now?
Everything's on computer now. And that's when I decided it's time to go, Mary. And I was 60. It's time to let the young people take over, because they have more knowledge. They have more training than you did, but I had the experience. So, I don't know.
To me, that experience...
It was a learning place. I'll tell you, if you ever worked ER, that's a learning place.
That experience, though, would be something that would be just almost impossible to put a value on, I think.
It is.
In the emergency room, would sometimes your difficult thing be with family members? I can see some of that being kind of difficult to deal with, too.
Yeah. Family members are, of course, they're excited. Oh, sure. They're nervous and scared. And we've really had some family problems, and we've had children that come in, and you had this little board called a papoose, and when they're little, you put them in a little papoose. And I have been called everything under the sun. Once by a little 4-year, F me and F that, and oh my God.
I've been here too long.
Oh, I never heard such language out of a little child. But
now that's something you probably don't have any, quote, training on either, is that dealing with the family, do you?
Yeah, we usually send the family out. A child is a lot more different with the family out. And that's hard on the family too, But also I've worked with doctors that I was holding a child once, holding the child's head because he was getting sutured, and they would wiggle no matter what, no matter how hard you tried not to let them. And doctor was aggravated because the child was moving. And he yelled at me. So I said, just a minute. And I walked out and I said, "Nurse, you can go in because I'm not working with him."
Oh,
And I did not work with him. I said, I told another doctor, you remember Dr. Bogus?
no, I remember the name, but not the doctor.
Well, his family was part of the ones that did Coca-Cola bottling.
Okay.
But he worked with us for a long time. And he yelled at me once. And I said, "You know, I don't even let my husband yell at me like that, and you're not going to yell at me like that either." And I walked out on him.
Did he have any rebuttal before he got to the door?
No, he just laughed about it. He thought it was so funny. He said, "Mary, I didn't think you'd do that." I said, "Well, I'm sorry."
No, I heard from nurses and other people that sometimes doctors are just almost impossible to deal with. They get temperamental and
Oh, yeah, they do. And that was the one doctor that I worked with that was a surgeon. He was very temperamental, and that's why nobody wanted to work with him.
so it's a matter sometimes of just biting your tongue and going
Yeah.
to it.
And I knew how to set up, and I knew what he was going to want with the type of surgery. It's always a small surgery like removing a mole or something that couldn't be done in the office. Something like that, nothing big. But anyhow, I loved my experience, and I enjoyed going to work.
That's great. Mary, anymore it seems like, and I'm not aware of the medical field and their decision of this, but the term outpatient is used for lots of times minor surgeries and stuff.
Almost anything, yeah.
What determines that something can be used or done on an outpatient basis versus regular hospital?
Something that they can put numbing medicine in that they don't have to put you to sleep. If they put you to sleep, give you a general anesthetic, they usually keep you overnight. But anything like, if they fix a toe or finger or something like that that's been broken. So I've helped put on many casts and I've taken them off. That always made me nervous. That saw always made so much noise, you know. But you also had to reassure the patient that this won't cut you.
And you see it even has the little teeth there around it. And it's,
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's scary looking. I've also helped the pediatricians circumcise little baby boys. They'd bring them down in the ER to do that. And I don't think there's anything I haven't helped do.
You have seen and done it all.
Yeah, yeah.
What would be your most, should we say, the most rewarding thing about working in the ER?
Well, for one thing, the group of people that I worked with was amazing. And to know that you've helped somebody, you've also helped the family by reassuring them. And I think that's what made the job good for me, knowing that you helped somebody. So, but anyhow, that's about it. I worked at Union, I've worked at regional, mostly regional. I worked at Palomar Hospital in California because we lived there 3 years. It's where I got my son. I remember Dr. Silverman delivered all my girls, and he said, after Carol was born was my 4th daughter. And I cried because I wanted a little boy so bad. He said, well, you're either going to have to get another husband or move. So when we got David in California, I come back and I told him, I said, well, I had to move to do it, didn't I?
So I guess that says, well, the doctors can be human and have a sense of humor too.
They can. They're not always mean or not always businesslike, you know. And I know in my days when I was working, I don't think it happens so much anymore, but they were generous with the staff. You know, they'd give us parties, they'd pay for it, you know, and pay for everything. But I think in this day and age, you're not doing that so much anymore. The little money. So.
I look at the mammoth equipment in an ambulance, or I look at the equipment in a doctor's office, and I've been in the emergency room. My goodness, the mechanical equipment that is there today. Mm-hmm. Now, I know all of that wasn't there 20, 25 years ago, or even before that.
That's why I was up in ICU one time, not as a patient, but I thought, oh gosh, I couldn't work here anymore. There's so many new apparatus, you know. And a lot of it we had in ER, the monitors and EKG machines and things like that, you know, that we could go ahead and do. But it seemed like their equipment was much more, I don't know, whether it was newer models or what it was. But
is it smarter?
Yeah, they're smarter. But anyhow, I enjoyed my job.
What is your take on that change in the mechanical equipment?
What is my take on it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it saves life, for sure.
Okay. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it saves lives. And that's what we're there for.
I know. We look back maybe when you started and even in the year 2000 and all, there was $1 when the person checked out of the hospital, and there's also $1 today. How does that compare?
My goodness, I can't even imagine. You know, talking about money, my insurance didn't pay my whole bill. So I got a bill from Union Hospital for $291. Okay. I've paid off bills before because my insurance didn't cover everything. And then they come over here in this little thing and say, if it's not paid by the 13th of November, it will be $364. They're adding over $70-some.
Late fees? That's high.
Isn't that? I've never dealt with union in several years because I always said, my doctor's a union doctor, but I said, you better send me to regional. But I thought, how do people do that? We live on fixed incomes. We don't have it just to haul out. I mean, maybe some people do, but I don't.
Certainly exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
With the Obamacare and the things they're dealing now with it and trying to get medical costs down, that seems to be a part of the big issue, though, with medical care is the high cost. And I hear, every once in a while you read something in the paper about someone's charged $20 for an aspirin or $15 for a Band-Aid and all.
Yeah.
Is this a part of the high cost problem, do you think?
I think it is. I think a lot of, you need to get an itemized bill and go over it because there's things on there that you know you didn't have. So, and I think that happens in all hospitals. But,
and I guess Medicare is wonderful, but I've been in the hospital and my wife was, and we never saw a bill from the hospital. It went directly to Medicare, and I guess they took care of it. Mm-hmm. But yet then there's that feeling of, well, was there stuff on there maybe that was not done or not necessary?
Yeah, and I'm sure there is. But do you have a supplement too? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the insurance I have, I'm going to call my insurance man because I want to talk to him. Because I had a full workup of, I had my heart, you know, echo, stress test, and all that last spring. I ended up paying $595 over what my insurance paid.
Ooh.
From Providence, And they were very nice to me because I called the lady who took care of that part, and I says, I could pay $100 a month. She says, can you pay that much? I said, I can pay $100 a month, and that was fine.
So-
I paid it every month till I paid it off. But union, you don't have a choice. You better pay that, or they're going to add you $70-some on it if you don't pay it on time.
Oh my.
And everybody don't get their Medicare on the first of the month. I don't.
I don't either.
So I wonder if they think everybody does. Surely they are up to date more than that. But anyhow, back to me.
Well,
Back to I'm tired griping about it.
but this, you're in this field, this medical field, and I think that's something that probably upsets a lot of people anymore, is because I want to be taken care of if I go to the emergency room. And I want to be able to stay there until I'm well or whatever. And it doesn't always work that way with some of these new medical guidelines.
It doesn't. So,
Do you think maybe, I'll say medical companies that make the doctors, make the medicines, pharmaceuticals and all, they always talk about the high cost of making a new medicine. And then, of course, they spread it out over years, and that's what makes it so high. Do you think a lot of the medical costs are the result of maybe gouging? I hate to use that word, gouging of medicine costs?
absolutely. You know, they used to, the representative would come in at ER, they'd bring us all kind of samples.
Yeah.
They've cut that out. They don't do that anymore, yeah. And they'd bring us lunch, you know. You don't have any of that anymore. There's no closer, things are colder anymore.
I think so.
It's not a family situation. And that's what I was used to, because that's the way we were. We were one big happy family.
But I
Taking
think
care of
that's-
everybody's emergencies.
I think that same thing true, though, is in the corporate world, wherever. I mean, you know, there used to be a camaraderie in the department, but anymore, everything's the bottom line, and, you know, if the budget's crimped, what?
I talked to one of the girls. I went last week. I had my yearly mammogram, but Kathy was the only one there that I knew. One person, and she says, "You don't know anybody in ER anymore because they've all changed." And we didn't have that changeover when we worked. We all worked there for years. But it's all changed now, and they say the care is not like it used to be. So,
I was wanting to address that issue because you mentioned being there for, how long was it?
27 years in ER.
And anymore, it seems like people don't even say sometimes 27 months.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a revolving door of people. Does that reduce the type of care a person gets coming into there?
I think so. I think so. Like my daughter Connie said, they want to hire the young ones that's right out of school. My daughter worked at Regional Hospital in labor and delivery. She was good at her job, 22 years, and she got fired. The director of nurses, where she's working now, in a nursing home. Just breaks my heart. Got fired by the same woman. One of Connie's friends who had cancer really bad, still trying to work. And she had, her white count was almost nothing. It was 1 or 2. You know how susceptible people are to get a disease. She made her work in pediatrics. I said I wouldn't want to be her on Judgment Day, because that is cruel, cruel. But that's another thing. People are not warm and friendly like they used to be. It's just a job. They're the first ones in line for that paycheck.
Well, this thing we talked about a little bit earlier, the young people being very well trained and able to do all of these things. But do they have a loyalty or a feeling of really wanting to do beyond and above, or is it just a paycheck?
It's just a paycheck, yeah. Yeah. So, I know, like I said, last year I was in the hospital because I was having a little hurting here. So Connie took me into the emergency room and I was there. The doctor was very nice. And she come in and told me everything that was going on. And also my former cohorts that was still at the hospital, like they're up in different departments now. They all come down, we talked and had fun while I was there waiting for all the tests. But they were very nice to me. That I don't even remember the doctor's name. And the nurse, you know, they were nice. So, but I'm sure a lot of people don't feel that way. I think it's because I was a retired employee.
With all of this, I guess that you've had that sounds like some very, very interesting and probably trying experiences in the past. Where do you see medical care going out into the future?
Where do I see it going? Well, it's got to get better. But I don't know. I don't know how to say this. I think it's going to be better because I think with the knowledge that they have, the new medicines that they have, the equipment they have, it's got to be better, you know, and people are trained. All the ambulances have paramedics.
Yeah.
They don't have EMTs anymore. They don't have EMTs in ER. It's all nurses now and doctors. So I wouldn't have a job anymore. Anyhow, I retired after 30 years. And then they called me up and said, would you be interested in being a greeter? Well, that's working at the desk as you come into the emergency room and they type you up and everything. And if the patient needs to go in, you call back and tell them, we need a nurse to take this patient on back. But I did that for a while. I retired twice.
Okay.
So I didn't work that very long, but because I wasn't that good with the computer. Now Jerry, she was one of my other friends that she come back at the same time. We were both greeters. And of course she worked out in the office where they typed the patients in, you know, before we got them. So she was experienced, but I wasn't good at it, so.
But you were good at
When
the
you're not
people
good at-
factor of it,
Oh,
greeting
yeah.
people a bit.
Yeah, I could do that. So,
Do you think automation and the computer and all of this stuff, though, has gone too far?
no,
Okay.
I think it is. Advanced is good because everything is typed on it's not written out that maybe you couldn't read what they wrote. Because that's when I had to get bifocals because oh my gosh, I can't read that.
I could never read a doctor's writing anyway. But anymore, even
You
a doctor's...
get used to that writing
Yes, you
though.
do. But the doctors, the nurses and all, either have an iPad or a computer terminal and all, and nothing's written down, it's all right there.
Yeah, it's all right there. And I've worked with doctors, foreign doctors, that we had Dr. McIntyre. I'll never forget him. He was such a little sweetheart. But when he got excited, jabber, 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 and I said, Dr. McIntyre, Dr. Mac, please slow down. I can't understand what you're saying.
And say he must have realized it then and slowed down. Huh?
Yeah, he'd slow down. He laughed, he'd slow down. Then one of our ER doctors I worked for, I took care of his children. He had 2 little girls, and he moved his family to Oklahoma, and my mother and I went out there and stayed for a couple of days. But they were so nice to me.
Well, Mary, we've covered a lot of discussion here about medical field, and I guess kind of maybe bypassed a little bit some of your experiences and your background. What brought you to Marshall?
My brother, well, actually my mother. They lived in Horseshoe Bend, Arkansas.
Oh.
And Dad passed away. I call my stepfather Dad because he was my dad to me. He passed away, and Mother was involved with her church and everything, and didn't want to move back then. And then one day it just, why am I here and my kids are elsewhere? I lived in Indiana and Bob lived over here because he married a Marshall girl. And so anyhow, Mother come back. She said, I don't want to live in Terre Haute. I said, okay. So Mother bought a house here on Archer, and we moved together. We did a lot of traveling together. And of course, I lost both of my parents to cancer. So anyhow, we lived together. We moved over here in 1990.
Okay.
So I've been here,
exactly what it was.
27 years? Is that right? I told you I wasn't very smart.
Pretty close.
So,
With your brother and you moving here, did you finally say, hey, our family's back together?
we were always close.
I kinda
Bob
thought
and I
you
were always close. He took care of me. I was his little sister. He took care of me. And you know, to this day, if I have something that it's really bothering me, like when I separated from my husband, I hate the word divorce. I hate that. But he's the first one I think about because he always protected me. And so anyhow, I was married 35 years, had 7 children. I had one deceased little boy that died in infancy. And my children are all kind of scattered around. I have 3 in the area, 1 in Terre Haute, 1 in Brazil, and 1 in Florida. My son-in-law said when he worked for GE, and he says, when I retire, I'm getting out of this weather. Because he worked as a lineman out, you know, they work out in that weather.
Why, yes.
So that's what they did. They lived down by Clearwater. So.
Kind of hurricane territory, though, too.
Oh,
isn't it?
yeah. But thank God, I mean, they went over to my granddaughter's house, because she takes care of the children, and she's got 2 little children. And they stayed there because she had hurricane windows and everything. So they stayed there, and when they went home, nothing was bothered at all.
Thank heavens.
So
Mary is going, go ahead.
I think Brooke lost a part of their fence they had around the backyard.
They are
That was
fortunate.
it. Thank God, and their electricity was out for several days, but
I heard Puerto Rico is still 75% of the country are
isn't that
without
sad?
power yet.
How are they surviving, you know?
I don't know. That makes you wonder.
Of course, I know a lot of people is helping them by sending water and food and everything.
Mary, growing up, did you have some hobbies and maybe something that's carried into a hobby that you're even experiencing today?
It just seemed like I didn't have time for hobbies. I was raising my family and working 5 days a week. I think my family was my hobby.
Oh, okay.
That's the only thing I ever wanted to be was a mother, a wife and a mother, and I always had to work. You know, you miss so much when you work.
Oh, yeah.
But
Now that you're retired,
my family's still my
I was going to
life.
say that's still your hobby then, right? Well, good.
I live with my son, who's a single parent, and has 2 little boys, 9 and 12. And so I'm still raising kids. I'm 82 years old and I'm still raising kids, for God's sake.
But I think, Mary, it sounds like, it looks like you're enjoying it.
I love my kids. Sometimes I don't love my kids, but you know, just let me go away and be quiet. Sometimes I'd like to be living in a nursing home.
Oh, no.
But being still in my good health.
Oh, yeah. Is there someone, an individual, somewhere along in your lifetime that has really influenced you more than anyone else?
I think the doctor I worked for, his name was Dr. Butt. That man, he was just so smart. And he was so kind. He'd come and pick me up if I was going to take care of the girls. He'd come and pick me up. He wouldn't let me drive. He took good care of me. And I think he was one of the best people in my life as far as somebody that I trusted, and he was honorable, you know. So I looked up to him.
Good. Is there an event in history somewhere along the way that's really indelible in your mind and you say, boy, that's just something it really influenced my life?
I can't think anything that really influenced my life. Can't think of anything.
Any world events that I guess maybe is indelible up there?
The world is really scary now. I worry about that.
I do too. And it doesn't seem like it's headed for the right, getting better either.
No. The thing that happened day before yesterday.
I mean, you can be out enjoying yourself and you never know what's around the corner.
I worry about my kids. My grandson, Jimmy, used to go to the Catholic Church. He was baptized, had his first communion at St. Mary's, but left the church, was going to another church. I said, well, he's trusting in God. He loves God. That's all that matters. I broke my heart. You know, we raised a Catholic family. We want them all to go there. But anyhow, Jimmy is teaching in South Vigo. It scares me to death. It scares me. There are so many kids that their whole life is just violence.
Yeah.
And they don't mind using violence. That scares me because Jimmy's not being brought up that way.
And I guess the trusting of people, the lack of trust.
Oh, yeah.
Kids anymore, I mean, it's just simply the way they're growing up.
You can't trust.
They don't trust anyone, which is kind of sad, really.
It is. When I was a kid, we slept on the floor in front of the screen door, unlocked. We lived in the country. Nobody ever bothered you.
And you didn't have to worry about it either.
Now you deadbolt your doors when you go to bed at night. It is sad. It's a sad world. So,
Mary, we've got so many modern electronics and things around us. Is there some modern convenience you'd say, gosh, I just couldn't live without that?
like electricity. I remember not having electricity and cleaning those little old lampshades, you know. You have to
Kerosene
stick
lights?
your hand up with paper, newspaper, and clean those every day. Didn't have running water. My brother used to get so mad at me because you have to go out to the outhouse, you know. And it seemed like I always had to go after dark, and I was scared. And Bobby gets amazed. Says, "Can't you ever go in the daytime?" Because he'd have to go with me.
And I think something like electricity is something we all just take for granted.
Yeah.
And if it goes off, the first thing you do when you go into a room is flip the switch. I mean, you know that's going to happen.
It's just like your eyeglasses that you wore over 40 years. I still automatically, where's my glasses, you know, when I get up. It's just something
Well,
that...
Mary, you've lived in Marshall now several years. And if you were traveling somewhere, and even in Florida or another country or something, and someone says, well, where are you from? You said, well, I'm from a little town in Marshall, Illinois. They'd say, oh,
Nobody ever heard of it.
What would you tell them about Marshall and why that might be a nice place to visit or live?
Because people are friendly. It's a nice, clean little town, and I like living here. That's
Pretty
all
good.
I got to say.
That's a pretty good answer. Well, with that, Mary, it's been a delight visiting with you, and I certainly
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time. And I guess your experience in the medical field is something, and I don't know, did you ever work with Dr. George?
No,
He was here in Marshall?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I wanted to ask.
yeah.
You've seen a lot of changes there.
Now, Dr. Turner was my sister-in-law's cousin. Mm-hmm. So,
Sure enough. So you got a little medical field in the family then.
well,
well-
I have a niece that's a nurse. My daughter's a nurse. And Bob's first wife was a nurse,
Oh.
and she died. And so Bob's lost 2 wives, so he's got the 3rd one now.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot, and I have a granddaughter-in-law who's a doctor.
Oh, wonderful.
She's an anesthesiologist in California.
Wow.
My eldest grandson, Brad Gerard, I love that kid. Well, he's 40 years old. But
Still a kid.
yeah, he met her through some friends, and she was starting medical school in Wisconsin. They moved to Wisconsin. She went to the university there. And so when she graduated, they moved back to California. And I seen him, well, my granddaughter in Florida just got married. So we had a beach wedding, and he was there. I love his hugs.
But I want to thank you again for your time and your bringing us up to date. You've had some interesting experiences in the past. We appreciate you sharing those with us.
Okay, thank you very
Then
much.
great.
So do you need to do, I need to tell you about the pictures or anything?
Edie will probably want to